WLRN Video presents.
Okay, welcome to WLRN. This is Thistle Pedersen reporting, and I have Joey Brite in the studio with me today. She is a lesbian feminist gender abolitionist and an activist based out of the Bay Area in the USA. She produced the Can I Get a Witness event last summer that brought together top campaigners for women, experts, and citizens from around the world to discuss gender identity, ideology, and culture. So welcome, Joey, to the program. Joey, we're on air. Joey Brite.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt you. I could not get my eyes off of Stella Parrott's brand new book, which is amazing. It's very relatable. You don't have to be in the UK. It is amazing. And one cartoon. Sorry, I thought maybe I was coming in a little late. Maybe you came in a little early. Can you see that in its correct direction of language there, of words, or is it backwards?
Any special dietary requirements, sir or madam? Yes, we can't have anything J.K. Rowling eats.
And that's 2020, right?
2020, all right. And that's what we're going to talk about today, right?
Order that book. Yes. It's about the highlights, right? That we're trying to go for the positive things, all of the wins that we had in different ways.
And there were a lot of highlights in the feminist movement, despite all of us hunkering down and being shut down by the coronavirus. I think
absolutely
amazing that women were able to come together in such a big way in 2020. Your conference was a part of that, for sure.
Well, thank you. That wasn't one of my top 10, but it was starting to, I will say that it's really interesting because here in California, just last week, there was a protest that went on in front of the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles, right there at one of the biggest gender clinics that this horrific butchering doctor does. And I asked the person that set that thing up, who has to remain anonymous, there is a story that was done out of that. I asked if she had seen the Can I Get a Witness and did it have anything to do with it, and she said it made all the difference in the world. It got her to get offline and join with other people. And there's like a whole network of parents in Los Angeles now as a result. There are many projects that I'm still hearing from August where people got together, a lot in the Discord chat. See, I was too focused on like directing the conference and having one speaker after the next, which you did as well. Everything's up on a YouTube channel. They can go to Facebook and look at Can I Get a Witness and get the links. But it's having these reverberating effects. I'm still getting emails from people and selling out the tickets of there were 500 people. I had speakers from 6 different countries, and from 10 different countries, the average was over 400 people that attended the conference. And then the number of projects and the stuff that's been going on has just continued to build around the world. Mm-hmm. So it's, I can say I didn't know what kind of an impact Can I Get a Witness was going to really have, and I haven't been able to put on any other panels. We've had ideas. They haven't always come through, but they've developed into other things. And I've been focusing efforts in California. So anyway, West Coast, and now we're doing, there's been a lot of growth. And yes, a lot of growth. In spite of the losses we've had, it's been amazing. And let me know anytime you want me to start with my sort of top 10. I have more than 10, but these wins, some of these incredible wins and these projects and things that women have created. Do you want to hear my?
Let's just dive in. What are some of the wins from 2020 in the feminist movement?
Well, some of the wins, and I wanted to start with her, just like I did, almost started exactly with her. Jennifer Bilic has arguably one of the most important blogs in the world. She has been touted as sort of the world expert at this point in terms of the deep dive that she's done into the money. We always say follow the money. I contacted Jennifer and I asked her to write about, in January of last year now, She started her blog called the 11thhourblog.com. She made her first blog post on January 23rd. And it was done as a means to confront the power structure behind the gender identity industry. And that's what people don't realize. This is an industry. And she said, it's not personal. This is all about commodifying us. In her own words, she said, I wanted to alert people that humanity is running out of time to act against the corporatists behind it. We are standing on the precipice where our sex roots as humans are currently being colonized by the corporate state for profit. Humans are the last frontier, considering the corporatists that have already ravaged most of the globe and so many other species. In order to dismantle and colonize humanity, our roots in sex must be broken. We have to be unmoored, and that is the process underway at this juncture in the guise of a human rights movement. We are in the 11th hour and must act quickly. And I think, and I may hearken back to that, I think that that is, if anything, that we saw at the end of 2019 where you had Leah Keith, you know, on the podcast talk about that, you know, yeah, we have to act quickly. And one of the things that I wanted to say is, this is sort of proselytizing, is get off Facebook, get off social media, make the connections that you need to there, and then take action. We can no longer be looking at the wax my balls guys and the ones with bad wigs and dress. Who cares? We know they exist. While you're busy spending your time doing that, they're creating legislation. So learn how to organize. That's what I'd like to say about that. One of the wonderful things that happened, and it came out of Can I Get a Witness as well. I mean, Sasha Ayad out of Texas has been working diligently since she, you know, has been working with gender dysphoric youth for years now. She joined with Stella O'Malley, and they've launched a new podcast called Gender, A Wider Lens. It launched on December 18th, and it's exploring gender, identity, and transition from a psychological perspective. And we all know that the affirm model doesn't even go into what all the other underlying issues are that come up for gender dysphoric youth. So that, again, it's called A Wider Gender, A Wider Lens. And I know these links will be included, you know, along with this later. From MK Fain, who created Spinster, she said that shortly after the Can I Get a Witness conference, we launched the 2.0 version of Spinster, and we now have over 15,000 users. Also, someone who saw my talk at Can I Get a Witness reached out to help fund the creation of a nonprofit dedicated to protecting women's freedom online. There's not much to say about it right now. We're still in the very early stages, but I believe it will launch in early 2021. From Brazil, and Eugenia Rodriguez created a website, No Corpo Certo, which is born in the right body, or in the right body. She sent me this and said that the Brazilian ministry published a statement against early interventions from trans medicine. She says, I talked briefly about this statement on the letter to Keira Bell I wrote to our campaign for No Corpo Certo. Another thing out of Brazil, Brazilian Congress passed a law to avoid harassment against women in politics. There is a whole link to that law project. If you want to see more, go to nocorpocerto.com. You'll see what's happening in Brazil. From Kara Dansky, the WHRC, which is the Women's Human Rights Campaign. I have a whole list of the countries and everything. Wonderful launch. As a matter of fact, as of this recording, WHRC, across the globe, there are 32 countries who have joined. I'm going to run through them quickly. If there's anybody that you think I miss: Argentina, Australia, the Bahamas, Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, Croatia, Denmark, France, Germany, Iceland, India, Indonesia, Iran, Ireland, Italy, Mexico, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Peru, Portugal, Serbia, Singapore, Slovakia, South Korea, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Ukraine, the United Kingdom, and of course in the USA. The WHRC USA distributed their version for the Equality for All Act, which was an alternative to the current Equality Act. Now, this stuff can be seen on the WHRC website. Links will be put up to that. The other thing that Keira spoke about is that she said, we filed this amicus brief in the case of, I'm not sure about the pronunciation of this, Hecox or Hecox, do you know what that is? Versus Little in the 9th District Court, Circuit Court of Appeals. So all of this and signing on and getting people to sign on to the Women's Declaration of Sex-Based Rights, really important. Lots going on there, a lot going on. And actually, after listing all those countries, the other thing that I wanted to say is that the Lgb Alliance out of the UK, they really went hard this past year, and we've got a whopping 15, again, as of this recording, and still growing, 15 Lgb alliances have popped up across the globe, with several joining in the coming months. There's an Lgb Alliance Canada, Lgb Alliance Ireland, Lgb Alliance USA, Spain, Mexico, Brazil, Iceland, Norway, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Wales, Australia, Serbia, and now we also have Germany. So the original Lgb Alliance that spawned this plethora of sister organizations around the globe, in December, Polish Lgb Alliance was formed. The Polish feminists and activists concerned about the harmful elements of transgenderism and its impact on women and homosexuals gave a good pushback on the leftist misogyny and homophobia occurring within the movement. As reporter K.S. Jolly reported for Feminist Current in a year-end article, she said the sheer scale of the protests have drawn international wonder and admiration. It's hard to disagree with the New Yorker's assessment. These protests are starting to feel like a revolution. Woo-hoo. One of the highlights for me, and I think maybe for you as well, Thistle, and so many people that would be seeing this, and particularly women, is that almost at the moment of lockdown, two women get together and they decide, we got to get something going, we got to get something going online, and we're going to do it weekly. It's out of London. We're going to credit Joe Brew and Bernadette O'Malley for coming up with this idea of the Women Human Rights Campaign, inviting women from around the world every Saturday. And here I am in California. I have to wake up sometimes 6:30, wipe my eyes out if I want to see it live. That's if I want to chat with other people on the side. The free Zoom events that they set up practically the moment that lockdown started. Was it April? I forget the first one.
Yeah, it was right around that time. The feminist question time is what they call it. I love the title of that show too, and the live aspect. And it feels like a good old fashioned like radio show, in where you feel the audience, and it's fantastic. And it was exactly what we needed at that time, because all of us were responding to the coronavirus and having to lock down. So
it was so prescient, I thought, of them. And what I did was I did a little interview with Joe Brew. I asked her some questions, and so I'm just going to go through that. I asked whose idea it was, and she told me herself and Bernadette. The tech team that they had to get together. I said, what obstacles did you have in the conception and the production? She said, paying for the Zoom webinar subscription is quite expensive, so we have to raise money to support this. I know this from the expenses that I had to do for Can I Get a Witness? I won't even go into the production stuff on that. Was off the charts. Ate up every stimulus payment that I ever got in the United States. She said, thinking up that format that would work well for women from as many parts of the world as possible. I said, what has been the most exciting and or surprising thing that has occurred in the webinars, with the webinar? She said, it's exciting that many women who are isolated have now found a space to network. The chat function changes the dynamics of an event, because instead of being rude, chatting adds a new complementary element to the webinars. I said, what might be planned for 2021 that either hasn't done in 2020, that either wasn't done in 2020? She said, lobbying of the United Nations and networking around the CSW. I didn't ask her what that was. Do you know what the CSW is? In March.
I used to know.
Shoot.
I don't know.
Shoot, I feel badly because I hate acronyms just being thrown out as if we're all supposed to know, what's going on. But anyway, I'll just throw that out there. She said lobbying the United Nations and networking around the CSW in March.
Commission on the Status of Women.
There we go. Also, actions around the Olympics in summer 2021. I said, what is the biggest ongoing challenge for the weekly Zoom meetings? Making the webinars international is hard because of the 3 p.m. on, I'm sorry, I went right into her answer. What's the biggest challenge ongoing for the weekly Zoom events? She said, making the webinars international is hard because 3 p.m. on Saturday, GMT, is the middle of the night in Southeast Asia and in Australia. And that is, if nobody has seen these webinars that are coming out of, the WHRC, you can see on their own YouTube channel. They will put these up later on, and there are a plethora of these. Now you just see women from around the world. It's amazing. Again, it is English speaking. So sometimes what's really amazing is seeing somebody from Serbia or whatever speaking English, and you know that it's not their first language. The patience that's there. Joe Brewer is one of the most incredible moderators that I have experienced around all this stuff. Another wonderful thing that came out of the US is the Women's Liberation Front, WOLF. In January and February, Women's Liberation Front hosted 2 conferences challenging the misogyny of the modern LGBT movement. Their bold criticisms of the misogyny and incoherence of transgender ideology provoked an internet firestorm, resulting in calls for the Seattle Public Library to breach the First Amendment and cancel one of the talks. The women of WOLF were not cowed, and continued to push this issue to the forefront of American politics, commissioning public opinion polls that show majority support for women's spaces and working with the state legislators to protect women's rights. By the end of the year, WOLF's efforts were rewarded when Democratic legislator Tulsi Gabbard introduced a House bill to keep women's sports in sex-segregated public schools and colleges. Which leads me to the sports news that we had, which was the World Rugby Association in October. They banned men who identify as women. Of course, this is my phrasing, as we're all trying to move away from the oppressor's language, right? Everywhere, universally. I know that it's something that many of us have spoken about, and we continue to, and it's changing more people as we take back the language, because the language is so important, because we know that changing language and how it's changing in the dictionary even, that women are now broken into categories. The word woman is already, these are the things that become law. And so we have to pay very close attention to stuff. The minute that we see legislation going through, we have to act on things because it affects everything. So in October, the World Rugby was decided to ban men who identify as women from competing with elite women at the international level. This is the first World Sports Federation to break with the International Olympic Committee, which is the IOC. And this is the position that is based on the game due to the stakes that are very high for the risks of injury. World Rugby has become the first international sports federation to adopt such a policy after finding, quote, at least a 20 to 30% greater risk to injury factors when a female player is tackled by someone who has gone through male puberty.
Right.
And then the other thing around sports that was exciting, 1 month later, Save Women's Sports in Australasia. It's now, because what it does is it's not just Australia, it includes other, I think that Tasmania, I believe, falls into that. I could be wrong. I'm sure you'll see comments later in the post, but Save Women's Sports Australasia was launched. I got that from the Save Women's Sports, actually Linda Blade, out of Canada. One of the most tremendous, of course, when you asked me about this and you said, you wanted me to come up with about 10 things, that happened and they had to happen in 2020. And I thought, of course, the two big things was the World Rugby Cup, the World Rugby, and of course the Keira Bell case and Mrs. A case out of Tavistock. This was amazing. It's like so many of these things that have gone on where women have written and said, this made me sane again. This is incredible. But Keira Bell and Mrs. A versus Tavistock Gender Clinic and Portland NHS, which is the national health system in the UK. Children under 16 with gender dysphoria are unlikely to be able to give informed consent to undergo treatment with puberty-blocking drugs, the 3 High Court judges ruled. This was on December 1st, so right towards the end of the year, and everybody went like, what a great way to end the year, right? The NHS said, the case brought against Tavistock and Portman NHS Trust, which said it was disappointed but immediately suspended such referrals for under 16s. And they started to change the language on the websites and everything, and the horrible organization Mermaids. They came up with no proof. They admitted that everything they had was anecdotal. They were not prepared for this. The NHS said it welcomed the charity the ruling would bring. One of the claimants, Keira Bell, said she was delighted by the judgment. Ms. Bell, 23, from Cambridge, had been referred to the Tavistock Centre, which runs the UK's only gender identity development services, also known as GIDS. She was there as a teenager and was prescribed puberty blockers at age 16. She argued the clinic should have challenged her more over her decision. That's where the psychotherapy, that's where the, don't go for affirmation. They should have challenged her more over her decision to transition to a male as a teenager. In the ruling, Dame Victoria Sharp, sitting with Lord Justice Lewis and Mrs. Justice Levin, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, he said, it is highly unlikely that a child aged 13 or under would be competent to give consent to the administration of puberty blockers. It's 1 point. It's also doubtful that a child aged 14 or 15 could understand and weigh the long-term risks and consequences of the administration of puberty blockers. And then they added, in respect of young persons 16 and over, the legal position is that there is a presumption that they have the ability to consent to medical treatment. Now, of course, nobody's, thrilled about the 16 and up thing, but it's another battle, isn't it? It's going to be something else. This was huge. And I have to say that literally, as we are recording this today on January 3rd, I was struck with grief hearing that this case, which we thought would not be able to handle an appeal, it's going to be appealed. And that news just came down for me about 2 hours ago before doing this.
The Keira Bell case is going to be appealed?
Yep.
Oh.
Yes, we were not, everybody's really surprised about that.
There were some attempts at appeals, but now one has stuck, huh?
We shall see what happens with that. News coming out of the UK this morning on January 3rd.
Okay.
So I'm going to bring back some positive things again, and this is on the lighter note. I want to say there's an incredible, that we know that there were lots of wins out of the UK. I think that the UK, in big part, has been our litmus test for what we need to be watching out for here.
TERF Island.
What's that?
TERF Island.
TERF Island. I love that. But they don't surf over there much, do they? Let's go turfing now? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, my favorite quote is from journalist Josephine Bartosh out of the UK. First of all, hail to Josephine Bartosh. She has written for a variety of publications, multitude of articles going after these gaslighting freaks. My favorite quote of the year came from her in terms of a journalist. She had many great articles, like I said. And this one, she said, Biological sex cannot be changed by clothes or pronouns any more than a pair of Christmas antlers makes one a reindeer. Love it.
That's wonderful.
On the other positive side, and there are just two of these that I'm going to mention, we know that a plethora of YouTube videos are coming out. They're really just in diary form of these detransitioners, or rather these women, most of them are very young, who decided to start going on either puberty blockers to cross hormones, which is a given, and then right to double mastectomies, which got this cool phrase of top surgery. No, they're double mastectomies or radical mastectomies. And they didn't go anywhere. Transition means to go somewhere. All they did was start to take on an identity, which many, many lesbians have done throughout time. I mean, some lesbians have passed as men in different ways for time. There's nothing to really go away from other than these young women that are saying they're called detransitioners, but they're stopping the hormones. They're trying to start the process of getting back, really their natural body without being medicalized and without taking drugs. It's not really different than, deciding that you're going to go off of other drugs and you're in recovery. So a lot of these young women, I would say they're in recovery, and tons of YouTube channels we have seen pop up. And many of those, what I like is that many of those young women, if they can get away from just doing the daily diary of their thing and really move again to activism and connect up with other women, if they are in fact, whether they're lesbians or not, that they connect with other female role models that they realize are out there in the world, they can feel good about their bodies. It all goes back to feminism, is my feeling around that. It's the idea of once you feel that core of self-love and you accept your body, and it goes back to Jennifer Bilic's work, and that I'll bring back Jennifer again, because I didn't realize how many of these women, like Lear Keith, also come out of the green resistance movement. The attachment to nature, the attachment again, and the birthing movement that Courtney Cat-Earth, I've learned so much from her about that centering of, womanness, if you will, or femaleness. And the thing is, with all these things going on in 2020, it really woke up a huge number of people. You can tell. And why do I say that? Because I don't know where she's located, but this woman named Karen Davis comes out of nowhere to me. She's got a YouTube channel she's got almost 4,000 subscribers at this point. And I hope by the time that people see this, she's got a channel called You're Kidding, Right? That's it. You're kidding, right? Almost with 4,000 subscribers. Take that up there. I'm going to mention one more person, and I'll tell you why I've picked these two YouTubers out of all of these YouTubers that have been talking about this gender ideology gaslighting. The first gay man that I know that has been doing, like, on the ground, oh my God, using his skills that he has with tech. Not only that, because he's been an actor, out of the UK, out of London, is a guy named, he goes by Mr. Menno. That is the name of his YouTube channel. He's got just a little over 2,000 subscribers, but he gained them very quickly. He's got the Puberty Blockers song, and that's literally what it's called. So between Karen Davis and Mr. Menno, why I picked them is because they have combined incredibly serious subject matter with humor, and it's worked to great effect. It helps to grow a movement when we have different kinds of things, whether it's media that involves music. You well know that. You have been doing that, Thistle, for a long time. Bringing in music, bringing in art, and in this way, him with his tech skills, Karen just talking like for real. She's for real. And these people, again, for me, it's like they kind of came out of nowhere, and they're doing amazing work, because again, it builds more attention and people go, what's going on? What is going on here? Because I think, Thistle, that most of the population really has no idea, and it's the parents. Besides, the lesbians were first, but they never listened to us, so I was screaming about this for years, but you know, we don't get listened to. There were lots of notable medical highlights that came out of 2020, and I got this from Twitter and the SEGM, SEGM. I got this from their Twitter. They said, following the 2019 review by Professor Carl Hennigan, which concluded that there is no quality evidence base to support the use of hormonal and surgical interventions in young people, 2 systematic reviews, one from England, the other from Sweden, came to similar conclusions. Consequently, Finland became the first country in 2020 to issue new guidelines for treatment of gender dysphoria for young people. That's just one piece of something. So they're talking about Finland. In Sweden, broad coverage of the controversy, including the documentary The Trans Train, produced by Sweden's national public television broadcaster, appears to have decreased demand for gender reassignment among teens.
Awesome.
This is which began to decline significantly in late 2019. So this is something that, you know, they got to see in 2020. So that's a nice thing. In the US, the issue of adolescent onset gender dysphoria was brought to the attention of the general audience by Abigail Shrier. Irreversible Damage, chosen by The Economist as the book of one of its books of the year. Abigail has handled the way that she's had trolls go after her book, everything, with a grace and a beauty that is only, I would say, equal to J.K. Rowling. There's another thing that I have to mention. We saw in going back to December 2019, when J.K. Rowling put out her famous tweet, you know, dress how you want, blah, 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 right? And then the attacks happened, and she was kind of quiet for a while, and she's working on the Ichabod all this summer. She got trashed so badly, she came out with an essay in June. Everybody can see J.K. Rowling's essay online. It is beautiful. She's much kinder than I am about certain things. When they talk about, you know, feminists not being kind, she's incredibly kind. The way that she speaks, everything about that. And actually, I lost a 20-year friendship out of that. I'll just throw that in as a personal note. I know I'm not the only one. I see this going on social media all over. Because of Can I Get a Witness? And like I said, I've gotten emails. I opened up sometimes my DMs and Facebook. I'm brought to tears because women are still, you know, realizing that the strides that we make, there'll be like a slump, and then maybe 2 more things come forward that are just beautiful. But these are nuggets, right? And a lot of these things we have to continue fighting them. The thing that I wanted to end with in terms of this beautiful thing happened in 2020. From a standpoint of being an activist, and I know I mentioned earlier, I'm sort of telling people, get offline and get to some action, you know, join with people. Of course, we have to be online to connect, but then do something. There's a young woman out of Israel, the work of Alix Aharon. Out of Israel comes one of the more formidable campaigners of women's rights. Alix has taken on surrogacy, dangerous policies taking place against women in the Israeli Defense Force, known as the IDF. And she has also created one of the most radically powerful, ongoing, interactive tracking systems of gender clinics across the globe. So it's called the Gender Offender Map. I doubt, and I want to tell people to get off Google, go to DuckDuckGo, because again, this has been mentioned, and if people have never heard this, if you go to Google and you type in, you're just curious, murdered women or women who have been murdered, and you put that into Google, everything comes up with trans women.
Yeah.
Everything, right? You go to DuckDuckGo, it's not, and I'm not doing this as an ad, I'm just saying that when we're probably going to have other search engines come up, we need to use what is not being controlled by incels as much as possible. If you don't know what an incel is, you can look that up. INCEL. They know right now if my phone is on and if I shot out of here and went to shop somewhere because, you know, that's what it is. We are tracked. If we have cell phones, we're tracked everywhere. But that Alix has created something, and why I'm saying I think this like wins my award for to have something that's ongoing. And as she says, my gender offender map is now the biggest resource into gender affirmative doctors. And you'll see, and I know that you'll be putting photos up of this stuff. She's got red dots on there that have testimonies and stories. And she asks people, if you or anyone you know has been hurt by a gender doctor, please add your testimony and mark it red so that I can add it to my site. So that, you know, that's where it's going. She says, my thinking is that we need to document what's going on, who is doing what to whom, so that these criminals cannot backpedal in 10 years and say they didn't do this. Everyone who is complicit in hurting children will have the price to pay. This project is so important and it will never finish. And we can't turn around just because we can't bear to look at the wreck. And why do I say that? There's a website that she put up that some people really object to. And why? Because the images that she has on there that are very real, but they're really hard to look at. And so when she says that you can't bear to look at the wreck, transgenderabuse.org, you're going to see it right there. And I go back to that quote that Jennifer Bilic said and why she's called her blog the 11th hour. The clock is ticking, people. You know, there's news that just came out of California. Like I said, I've been working in California and we'll see what develops with that. But at this point, that the language is changing and they are calling women's natural breasts abnormal. This state that I am in has been moving things so quickly. In the middle of the night, they invited people to be involved in phone calls this past year. I was on one of them with citizen after citizen after citizen saying, do not allow this thing to pass. There have been several bills like that, and they've still passed. And I know that we had a very contentious, still goes on. There have been a lot of splits among feminists and among women and people of consciousness, a lot of longtime Democrats, a lot of longtime leftists, former left now, working with people that are supposedly on the right. And I've been accused of that from Can I Get a Witness, from involving, just because why? I had some people who call themselves Christian and they're a faith. I'm an atheist. They knew that. I think that the big uniter of 2020 has been that people from the so-called progressive left and everything, not with blinders on, but with open hearts a lot more, working with people who have typically been, and I say the far right, and those people, and I've talked with them. I've had people tell me, Joey, I've never talked to a homosexual before. And I say, that you know of.
You are listening to WLRN.
But people that are opening up to that and then looking at where do we unite? And this thing that I know even Lgb Alliance in the UK has to deal with, every Lgb Alliance now that's popping up like a brand all over the world. I love that. Nobody's taking money from right-wing organizations. Nobody. I didn't take any right-wing money to put out Can I Get a Witness? That was self-financed. I had to create a company for that. Everybody I know is trying to work with donations. We're on a thin line of existence. I don't know anybody that gets paid for the kind of stuff that we do. And this has been true for years and years. You know, people that have worked in the environmental movement, people that have worked like the birthing movement and whatever. This is the narrative that's being used against all of us. And especially now because the narrative is to do that and keep plowing to Democrats and keep plowing to the people that have been progressive in terms of social progression and wanting to accept everything and everything got inclusive. If you don't draw lines and you say, let's include everybody, that is exactly what happened to lesbian, gay, bisexual, and all of a sudden, only a handful of women and lesbians like me from across the world. I know that there are women, I've talked to them in the UK, because it started happening there as well, started to notice that when the T came in, a friend of mine who recently passed away, we used to talk about this all the time. And when the T came in, we said, that's a Trojan horse. We weren't sure what it was, but we knew it wasn't a sexual orientation.
Right.
And even me being a gender nonconforming, tomboy, teenager, there's no way, even when I had long hair, it doesn't matter. I've always been gender nonconforming, and I've been a lesbian for a very long time and targeted for that. And there was no way, but I had no idea. And I've said this in another broadcast. There's another channel that is important, I think, for people to pay attention to. It's Erin Brewer's channel. And she's got a lot of different interviews with a whole bunch of different people. But the thing is, the T was a Trojan horse. This idea of all the language that we're supposed to use and all of that. Jane Wheeler from her own organization, Rhyme, part of Can I Get a Witness also. We had, she presented us with a chart that shows how the money went from gay, the money they were doing. We're talking messaging. We're talking everything that has to do with messaging, ads, all of that. The money that changed between focusing on gay men, lesbians, which were really low, and then it would kind of go up and down. When the T came in, you see it increasing from 2013 on. To where everything now, and this is why gay men are finally taking notice. There are, I brought up Mr. Menno, but I'm talking to other gay men about this as well now that are going, wait, what's going on? They're having their own meetings and trying to join as gender critical gay men who are looking at, and they realize that this is about the elimination of biological sex. And if we eliminate biological sex, what does that mean? So that affects everybody, not just statistics, of course. But this is so dangerous. It is so antithetical to feminism and to any women's rights campaigners or whatever. It's antithetical to the so-called right, which now I'm calling the Democratic Party. It's like, if we get into politics, who's the right anymore? Because the right to me have always been those people that vote Republican, and they vote against a lot the interests of women. Well, we're seeing more Republicans, and this is not a pro-Republican from America campaign, believe me. But the splits that happened around the recent presidential election and still continue on, I'm going to tell anybody in the country and internationally, we were screwed. No matter who we voted for, we have a broken system. The Biden administration, which I wish I could have been thrilled about before. I worked on Kamala Harris's couple of her campaigns. Asked me if I feel betrayed. She allowed in California for boys to compete as girls in high school here in the state of California in 2019.
Oh dear.
So years of thinking that I was, again, I raised money for Obama's campaign. I had no idea that Jennifer Pritzker, a man, was behind all the money. Well, he's not the only one, but Jennifer Pritzker was very much involved in helping the Obamas get where they are. Again, go back to the 11thhourblog.com. You can read about the incredibly wealthy white men who are pushing transgenderism.
Can I just intervene here for a second and talk a little bit about Kamala Harris? Because I remember when they accepted that they had won the election, they gave these speeches.
Mm-hmm.
I watched her speech, and she talked about girls and women and how every little girl out there that looks like me now can see that women can be successful in politics. I'm paraphrasing, but she talked about women and girls a lot in her speech. Yeah. And she never said cisgender girls.
No.
And she never talked about trans. And so I feel like there's this insidious thing that's going on where they hide that language when it's convenient to them to win the American public over. but then that language appears in like the Equality Act, for example, the language of gender identity.
Replacing sex.
Replacing sex, and that their policies, like Kamala Harris, you're telling me that she passed some sort of policy in 2019 that allows for boys in high schools, public high schools in California, to compete in women or girls sports. And so it's just, I can see why the American public is confused.
Politics is an ugly, filthy thing to get involved in. After the work that I did in 2007, 8, coming back in 2012 to help Obama, get reelected and all that, I always thought I would never, ever regret all of the hundreds of dollars of my own money and thousands that I helped raise for the campaign. And I was by no means, some gigantic, I wasn't a donor. I did fundraisers and stuff like millions of other Americans did. I have often gone back in my mind, like, if I knew then what I know now about Pritzker, about where that money was coming from, because with Obama and the initial things, that were going on about the bathrooms, for example, talking with other friends about this that were getting very highly suspicious again about the tea thing coming in. And we all said, this isn't just about bathrooms. Bathrooms is like, that's like a red herring where, that's like the thing they want us to sort of like, it's a distractor. They want us to focus on that while they're doing this other thing. And that was exactly what happened. And honestly, if I knew then what I know now, because the Republicans at that point in time when Obama was running it was ugly for my heart to think about the Republicans getting back in. But I go back again, we have a broken political system here. We don't have, we've got more than 2 parties, but we really don't. As long as my opinion, as long as we keep the Electoral College and as long as there's money, and that's the key thing again, because as long as there's money that drives the language, that creates the laws and all of this, I go back again and say, study Martine Rothblatt. Anybody wants to know why we are in, if there was one thing, because there's not just one thing, but when you think about what is the goal that's happening here, and as I've learned from Jennifer, I love this phrase, and I think, as she has said many times, this isn't personal. This is about unmooring us from our sexed bodies. What does that mean when I say that to a straight man? What does that mean when I say that to a straight woman, to another lesbian, to a young person, male or female? Because sex is binary. When you see something like a campaign that we just saw come down when the Keira Bell decision on December 1st, on a Monday, should have been news across the world. What was already in the works? And I'm saying this because we have a somewhat unknown American actress to the rest of the world, but in the United States, we have this young woman whose name I'm not even going to say, who's an actress who gets revered because she came out publicly in 2014, 6 years ago, as a lesbian. The young lesbians in the country were like, yeah, that's great. We really like her. She's cute. She's little, all that. And I literally caught that live when she came out. Ring, ring went my phone. Friend, oh shit, did you just see that? Yeah, shit. Why? Because when you look at that footage and you can see it on YouTube and hear her talk, and her coming out was so weird, because it wasn't the normal coming out and the thanking the family or the lover or this or that, the girlfriend. What you see are the stuff, and this is what we always have to look at. Look at what's behind and surrounding those people, from the red carpet on or whatever. You've got organizations like GLSEN, Planned Parenthood, the HRC. I'm going to throw in all of the media that we have thought as more socially progressive people in this country that kind of had our backs. They have all been captured. even the National Organization for Women have men who are identifying as women in top positions. National Organization for Women is gone. The ACLU, gone. Planned Parenthood, gone.
Yeah.
All of these organizations that used to work in tandem with people like me, I used to be an advisor between a high school in downtown Oakland and a college that used to be just considered a women-only college, Mills College in California. I was an advisor and a mediator between the campuses. I was part of GLISN years ago, GLISN. We did, they were doing really great work. And I used them for advice, when I was working with the high school students and stuff. When you see that young actress from 2014 come out, and then the same day that Keira Bell, that news that the world should have heard of, that wasn't an accident. And I'm here to tell you there's no way, because her Wikipedia page was changed, her IMDb was changed to the new name, and all she did was come out and say, I'm trans. And it took the world by surprise. It was the front page. It came on the cover of things. Hardly anybody heard about Keira Bell, except for those of us that are involved in this. And that's why we need to get out of our bubbles and get out in the streets.
Media blackout has been tremendous over the past 10 years dealing with this issue. It's incredible, the news that's happened that has not been covered by media sources that you and I used to trust. I mean, Democracy Now! I used to always listen to Democracy Now! In fact, Amy Goodman was a huge shero of mine until I heard her refer to a male penis as a female organ, and I was like, what the heck are you talking about? Her penis?
MSNBC, CNN, Democracy Now!
Yeah.
And you say that about Democracy Now! My diet in audio, my diet has been NPR.
Right.
Captured.
They've
absolutely captured.
But what's interesting about media, and I think I was trying to get to that before, is like the trans activists want to make it appear that there's no conflict between women's rights and trans rights. We can all, if you just accept us, we can all live together in peace and harmony. But, there obviously is a conflict. It's just been an incredible thing that the media has embraced that contradiction. And so sometimes you will see the media do something that's very pro-feminist, and they don't use the transgender terminology and language, as if that isn't happening at all. But then in another program, in another context on the same channel, NPR or Democracy Now! Or whatever. So it's like there's this cognitive dissonance. And they use that cognitive dissonance to say, look, we can be feminist and pro-woman and pro-trans, but you and I know that that there's an inherent conflict between transgender ideology that says you can be born in the wrong body, and feminism, which encourages us to love our bodies as ourselves. And anyway, I just wanted to say that about the media blackout and just how crazy the cognitive dissonance is. And I hope at some point that we can break the sound barrier and get more and more people viewing alternative media and going to conferences like Can I Get a Witness, and reading Jennifer Bilic's blog and MK Fain's 4W Pub and all of that, and we don't have the money. What we have is the passion and the truth on our side, That's got to count for something.
Well, it's like with the WHRC doing this stuff from around the world. I know that there's a really exciting conference that's going to be coming up. I think is it from Korea? Is it South Korea or North Korea? It's South Korea. It's the only one that's going to be able to allow it. South Korea, I believe. You have three feminists that are going to be talking about these incredible strides, right?
Right.
Those are things that we need to build on.
Yep.
And we need to, because what you're talking about, Thistle, yes, it goes back to, there's so many different elements of this. So if we go to the money and say, well, why are we in this mess? Like, what happened with this? Why is this gaslighting going on? It takes money to drive anything, but you have to have a blueprint in your brain of what is it, like with any PR campaign, what is the narrative that you are pushing? And in the United States, we don't have royals, but we have celebrities, and we've got TV, and we have reality shows and all that. And I know it's been talked about a million times, but the influence, I don't even want to say the name of this child who's now an adult, the influence of a child out of Florida whose mother, whose Munchausen mother, started to turn him into, a girl, trying to gaslight everybody that her child is a girl, who's now an adult, has a doll. So you look at all the merchandising that comes out of a child who supposedly is being turned into the opposite sex. Although they say that binary doesn't exist, right? That's exactly where they're going. Of course, these things conflict, but it's a constant circle, and they're trying now to get away from the language like, oh, we didn't say that anybody's born in the wrong body, and that's where non-binary comes in. M.K. Fain wrote a fantastic article called "Non-Binary is a New Misogyny," and that's on 4W Pub. It's mind-boggling the number of things that come up. But here's the thing, and I'll say this, is that for me, and one of the things that I want to take on are all of the women and the lesbian women who call themselves feminists, who are about the worst offenders of this. They are shutting these conversations down. They have joined in to become the butchers of these kids as they become surgeons. And then you look at surgeons and lawyers, like the ACLU has their little pit bull and Chase Strangio, You look at this stuff, and when I think that I'm somebody who thought I was going to become a man, years ago now, it was a huge journey for me to get to that place where I finally stopped any notion that I was going to go on cross hormones and all that. I've said this before, I was lucky. I ended up, seeking out a psychotherapist, which you needed at the time. You needed to go to psychotherapy, and you needed the psychotherapist to then work with a psychologist who was connected to a psychiatrist, because that's where the drug is. I wanted to get hormones so I could start growing hair on my face, pass as a guy. And I thought I would be a better man because of my feminist influence and the fact that I grew up as a female. Like, it was like opposing, this war. I saw this war on women from the time I was a little kid. I didn't understand it all. Of course, I got political as I got older, but I thought I would be a better man. And I think that's what a lot of these women think that they're going to be, that Stephen Whittle in the UK, Chase Strangio here, they are hardcore pushing this because they have to validate everything that they have done. And you cannot say that you are trans. You want to use that word so that you're saying you're this in between, you're this other, what is that, in between sexes, whatever, because you're not moving to anything, right? You can't say that you're that and you want to call yourself that. And this is for men and women who say that they're trans and gender critical. There's no such thing. It's a hypocrisy built in right there. You might spout certain things.
You wrote that wonderful article in 2020 about that, about these, gender critical allies that are identifying as trans. What was the name of that article? It got a lot of attention.
The 4 Horsemen of the Gender Critical Apocalypse. It's in Uncommon Ground Media. It created such a storm that I literally, when the article came out, I wanted to make impact. In this idea from these fantastic articles that Dr. M they've been publishing in Uncommon Ground Media, and I want to give props to Dan Fisher and Uncommon Ground Media out of the UK, because I think it's been the top the top publication that is taking on the gender identity industry in that way by allowing all of these people to publish these questioning, challenging articles. And Dr. M has gone back to what happened before Be Nice feminism. And that's where people can start seeing the infiltration and the invasion of, by looking at and studying what was happening in lesbian culture. I was living in it. I watched the only women's record company ever, Olivia Records, hire the man that had been Jimi Hendrix's recording, engineer. Came because he felt like a woman. They said he was transsexual, and they hired him. And that split the community back then. There have always been, in these movements, there's always been splits. So when I was talking to people about that I wanted to write something I'd been thinking about for a long time, because I was tired of seeing these people getting platformed, getting talked about. And I went, wait, this doesn't make any sense, having these articles. And again, because I come from the perspective of, I almost went there. I almost became one of those people who would have been telling you, well, I'm a different kind of man. I guess that was it. I was a different kind of man. I almost did that. So I have that mindset for years and years and years. And what I will say and dare to say, I had that self-hatred. That's what it is. It is internalized misogyny that is so to the core. And women do that. I don't care what your sexual orientation is. Women do that self-hatred. We perform it in many different ways. It's demonstrated with anorexia, with cutting, any number of things, drugs, alcohol, and you see it. And a lot of women that go to this now includes this level of youth, these young women that have not been able to really have role models. There's no more community. They can't connect, whatever. They're online. Many of them are autistic. And they think, because they're connected up in the work that Lisa Littman did, that produced Abigail Schreier writing the book Irreversible Damage, as she did.
Littman, the professor out of Brown University.
Yes, that did the whole study and found that girls, on the internet were forming friend clusters. Yep. And if a girl started to say something like, I think I like other girls, or I kind of feel like a guy or something, a lot of kids say stuff like that. Most of them, they haven't had sex, they haven't explored their sexuality, they don't know what their sexual orientation is, and they immediately have a kid that says, you're trans, and now it becomes acceptable. So you've got the money with an architect, I will say, Martin Rothblatt. He's not the only one, but he's one of the wealthiest in the world. A lawyer, he's created a religion called Terasem. This guy wants to do away with biological sex. And you say, well, why? I'm going to dare to say it. And I didn't want to do it at my conference because I thought, I'll never get the bodies in here. I'll never get the 500 people, who registered for that conference. If I say a thing, or I have my guests say anything about transhumanism, I thought they're going to get freaked out. They're going to go this is somebody who believes in conspiracies. There really are only two women that I know that their entire focus is looking at the money and looking at the goal. And that is Jennifer Bilic and the work of a woman who has to remain anonymous called the Deprogrammer. The Deprogrammer XX on YouTube is essential for anybody to help understand, besides Jennifer's work, all these months later, and after first getting introduced to Jennifer's work and then discovering the Deprogrammer XX, these women are doing the deep work. That's all there is to it. It's the money with a game plan. Again, you got your blueprint. The next thing is, this transgenderism is only an experiment. Are people going to take it on? Are they going to look at it? There's the kid out of Florida that is now an adult that has a doll that all these women want to turn their sons into little girls.
There's no Megan Murphy doll equivalent.
You know what? That would be funny. We should just make some dolls that are...
for girls to have a feminist role model in the form of, I don't know, I think that it could be possible.
It's a great idea. It's a great idea. It's funny. But the thing again is that what we will do if we don't examine this really closely, as you say something like that, is how many white role models would we end up having? I mean, this whole thing about, I know women that say, I don't call myself gender critical. I don't want to call myself gender critical. I said, well, why? Because I just came into it. It wasn't something that I used years ago at all. And they said, because it's a white women's movement.
Oh, okay.
Well, there's optics. And then there's also, you just mentioned Megan Murphy.
Right.
Much admiration for Megan.
Right.
But, if we were to start putting dolls out, they would be a bunch of white women. I know that would happen. And so we'd have to be really...
A doll. We could make
a what?
Karen Davis doll.
Karen Davis doll. I'm sure she'd like that. It would be funny because Karen Davis has talked a lot about if her hair grows out to a certain point, it's like going to explode or something. It'd be a funny doll where we could have the hair go back. No. But there's the thing is that, again, with the fact that I got turned on to you a long time ago because of your getting, deplatformed, we have to continue, in the words of Julia Long, who was saying something like, nobody gets canceled. Stop talking about being canceled. Even though I started this out with Stella Parrott's book, 2020, the year we were all canceled. The thing is, for every thing that we feel like we just got kicked in the teeth, that's where we get creative and go to a new outlet. Find a new ally. You just lost a friend like I did of over 20 years. I mean, a deep friendship. You just lost somebody because she starts calling you a bully because you agree with J.K. Rowling's essay. Oh my God. I have women crying to me about how they've had disagreements and lost stuff. And I said, was that person really a friend? Because here we are at another time in history, just like when the McCarthy era happened here in the United States in 1955. Are you going to sign something and turn somebody's name in to save yourself from going to jail and say, am I going to say Thistle Pedersen was against the Equal Rights Amendment? And the list gets really big. And this is exactly what those traitors, and for me as a lesbian, I am so pissed off. What we just saw Billie Jean King do and Megan Rapinoe, I think that's how you pronounce her last name. These are they're not just two top female athletes. These are lesbians. They're out lesbians who are top athletes that a lot of women around the world and men went, wow, these women are amazing. Yes, different ages and all that. And they get a freaking petition together to push and get 174 signatures from other women that say that men who feel like they're women should be allowed to compete as women in women's sports. I don't know.
Such a betrayal.
I don't know what we're going to see, Thistle, with the Olympics in 2021.
Wow, yeah.
But it's going to be very interesting. And they're still calling it. I found out from Linda and Beth Stelzer, who started Save Women's Sports, that it is being called Tokyo 2020. They're still calling it that. I think it's interesting. They have to stick to the, they have to stick to the year, I guess, every 4-year thing. But, is it going to take a woman being severely injured? And then would it be just that sport that they would say, oh, I guess we won't let, these male-bodied people in? Is it going to be a death? Is it going to be a permanent injury? Is it going to be brain damage? Is it going to be a lost limb? Is it going to be what is it going to take? But there we go, because Martine Rothblatt just thinks we're going towards robotics and body parts that can just be replaced. And you don't need an artificial wombs. And we've got surrogacy on the rise. I never used to connect. That's just me. That's why I was so happy to meet with somebody like the Deprogrammer XX and Jennifer. What do they have in common? The environmental movement. Even though one went in the direction of being a trans activist until she started to realize, I don't want to completely paraphrase, but I believe that she began to realize the connection between rape culture and pedophilia. Because the thing is, if you're going to do away with biological sex, that means you eliminate boundaries. And if you start eliminating boundaries the way that Scientology, another very well-known cult, that treats children as adults So when we say where are the adults in the room, there aren't any, because if boundaries are erased, again, in language and in law and in case by case that comes up,
Yeah.
there are no women's rights and there are no children's rights. And that's the women and children have always been. And when you look at that, that's when we're talking about The Handmaid's Tale. People think it's a joke. No. Other work that I brought up, Alix Aharon in Israel, she informed me that gay men in Israel, and the gay men that have a lot of money in Israel, they own tech companies, big companies, she said. So if you get a gay man who has a lot of money, he makes a lot of money, and he gets together in a couple with another gay man who owns a company, often in that same field, you've got a double income couple that is wealthier quite often than a heterosexual couple over there. What do you think the government is doing to help these gay guys, these couples? They're literally they're helping them with money, more money, with surrogacy, so that they can have their sperm and reproduce children with, guess who? Again, we get into class, we get into poverty. Women who are poor, impoverished, ethnic women they're getting paid to have babies for gay male couples. When I started connecting with Jennifer Lahl, Lahl, she's got a bioethics company, and I think she's like the world expert on surrogacy. She's got her stuff down. You can go onto Amazon and see a ton of her videos. She is tirelessly working on these documentaries. I never liked surrogacy. I always did think it was a way to, have women's bodies commodified and just kind of horrible. But now, this feminist of years and years, now I really see the connection between prostitution, pornography, surrogacy, this idea of having an attitude that I did many, many years ago, where I thought, that I did call a thing such as sex work, that prostitution was sex work and it was work. Oh my God, I have to admit that was something that I did, because that was one of the things that I accepted. But when the third wave inclusionism started to come in, that's where that's where all of this got born. So if Martine Rothblatt is one of the major architects of this, everything that he's doing, from transgenderism to transhumanism, we're seeing it right now. Mm-hmm. And ending with this, like I said, the clock is ticking. We had a tremendous amount of strides in 2020. We cannot be complacent. We're going to keep on rocking. All of the women that are doing stuff from all over the world, that this continues. The Lgb Alliance that is developing all over, WHRCs that are happening all over. Women are waking up, and men of good conscience are finally joining in, and we're going to see more and more of this, and it's going to explode. And the parents, we're going to see what happens, because the parents are the ones that are going, we see what's going on. Oh my God, I don't care what you believe in. I don't care if you believe in a religion or not. Let's get together. And we're a really powerful force when we work together like this.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your rundown of the highlights of the feminist movement in 2020 with us today, Joey Brite. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we sign off?
Nothing other than pay attention to things. Don't just create idols and fandom over people. Question everything. It's an old adage, but look at whatever your argument is, wherever place we come to these movements, and we come to consciousness around things by asking questions and challenging each other, not just accepting somebody whose work has been fantastic in, say, the area of prostitution or this or that, in the whole realm of women's campaigning. Look at everything. Look at the character of the person. If they start asking for money, look at what that's about, because that's the other thing that we're being pulled, all these GoFundMe, this and that. Look at even the people that you really have a lot of respect for. If they open up a GoFundMe or any kind of anything, don't just donate. look right away at the whole picture, you know, slow down a little bit, because all of us are on the internet. We get affected like that. Boom, we're going into our PayPal, we're sending this and that. And then you realize that person just grifted you. You know, these are these things that are going on. So 2021, let's rock it. Be careful with your pocket. Be careful with what you say yes to. And these relationships that we're forming are powerful. They're really powerful. So let's keep building. And thank you, Thistle.
Thank you so much.
I will look to you. All right.